This is part of the APAC Second Global Education and Skills Conclave, and this has been happening in the last 3 days. The first couple of days were focused on the higher education, and today we are focusing on schools. So before I start on the panel, I would like to introduce each of the panelists, the esteemed panelists who are on the show. So let me introduce one by one the panelists. First, we have Ananta Krishnan Balasubramanian, CEO Operations ColorX Group. Welcome, Ananta. We have Dr. Amrita Vora, Director Education, James International School. Welcome. We have Dr. Sarvesh Naidu, Executive Vice President, Trins Group of Schools. Welcome. We have Ms. Pratima Sinha, CEO, DSR Educational Society. We have Dr. Manjula Raman, CEO, Royal Concord International Group of Schools. Welcome, Dr. Manjula. We have Mukesh Sharma, Chairman and Director of the Prometheus School. Welcome, Mukesh. We have Ms. Devika Chand, Director Principal, JBCN International School. Welcome, ma'am, to the program. We also have Dr. Sunita Swaraj, Principal, the Heritage School, Vasant Kunj. Welcome, Dr. Swaraj. So, today's topic is basically focusing on the role of IT and new age technologies in the education sector. So, before we embark on that, context, what I would like to mention is what we have seen in the last 1 year. So while technology perhaps was gradually seeping into the education segment even before that, but definitely what happened in this pandemic scenario is the whole process got suddenly accelerated, and today's virtual education is, if I may say, completely dependent on technology. So, while there are aspects, the softer aspects of it in terms of how the technology adoption, is it really democratized in terms of reaching out to students of all strata of society, and whether the bandwidth or infrastructure or the devices, they permit everyone to have it. But for this panel, we would like to focus more on what really technology can do, and the scope of using different kind of technologies, and how from your personal experiences in your schools you have adopted this technology. So there are different areas. So we can talk about the artificial intelligence and machine learning and analytics, how analytics has been used to gain better insights from data. We would like to talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, and subsequent gamification, and how that has been used in the training methodologies. We would like to talk about blockchain and other security methodologies, especially since virtual education is being imparted online. Security is an important aspect. We would also like to mention about different use of robots and other kinds of um, IoT-based, sensor-based technologies. But more than specifically the technology, the first basic question which I want to run through all the panelists is, looking back at 1.5 years, how much would you see these new age technologies have, if I may say, facilitated the virtual education, and how has the different stakeholders in the system, so that would involve the students obviously, as well as the teachers who are teaching, how much have they accepted these new age technologies? So I may start with you, Ananta.
First thing first, thank you very much, Mr. Day, and I would like to thank APAC for this particular opportunity. Uh, we are a group of schools from Gujarat primarily, right? And we've been into schooling for more than 25 years now. Uh, we are the initial implementers of technology for the last about 25 years since the time that we incepted, right? So we were the initial guys who kind of brought in the ICT technology to the classrooms in Gujarat. We were the first guys to use the ERP systems in the culture of and we were one among the initial adapters of the online teaching and learning curriculums, even before the COVID kind of pandemic hit the country in a devastating mode. While I speak about technology, there is a lot that technology can really do, right? So after having understood the real requirement, our teachers were actually on the higher edge of usage of technology. So their way adaptability was never an issue to us, right? But then while going on with this kind of a model for a long-term tenure, it does impact certain other aspects of a personality, right? The socio-economic structure gets a backseat, right? While learning per se, I would not say that the learnings have not achieved the given outcomes that were decided before, but then the mental stress is one big factor which we have to really now work upon and think upon, right? Having said that, I'll come back to technology for a minute and then I'll go back to the other areas that we need to really get across to. So, with the integrated technologies of IoT and AI and AR, VR coming in, we kind of understood that there's a need of integration of all the various technologies available in the school environment, right? So first thing first, what we did was after about 6 months of understanding that this is going to be the way forward, we did have our own ERPs in place, but we thought about getting an integrated ERP developed as per our requirement, which can incorporate both LMS and LEP to the level that it can enable a self-paced learning for every child. It can enable AI interferences across the classrooms and at homes, right? And it can guide the students to whatever they need as a gap filling mechanism, right? So we are at the kind of I should say 75 to 80% mark of going through these ERPs, right? We use a lot of video based learning, so we kind of create a lot of videos and we encourage the children to also create a lot of videos using which we do a lot of flip technology and flip learning in the classroom and from the homes and vice versa. While I say this, we thought and we felt a need of bringing in a kind of a self-paced learning curriculum, which we wanted to give it not only across to our own kids, but we wanted to give it to kids across the country. So we developed something called as eCal. It's an online platform of learning, right? So wherein we bring in components of school curricula. At the same point in time, we also bring in other learning requirements, like for example the languages. We're integrating the languages. We're integrating the soft skills, the life skills. So all part of a continuous learning process that a child should engage in, right, during the tenure of nursery to standard 12. So we're trying to bring in all those aspects using the eCal methodology. Now, having said this, the next phase of work that we would like to do with our teachers is, of course, skill development and skill enhancement and upskilling trainers have been a very frequent part of our structure. But then there's a lot of things that they need to work upon mental and physical health at this point in time for both the students and the teachers. So now we are working in those lines to bring up a mechanism where we can have a real-time control over the physical and the mental health of and the well-being of the teachers as well as the students per se. Using this, we want to reach out to the society, the nth child in the school. Few things we have also tried to do is we try to kind of encourage a lot of peer-to-peer learning. We are at our cities that we have our schools. We are trying to reach out to other schools to also do an engagement program wherein multiple schools can come together into a kind of a a group or a hub, and that hub can be the basic focused learning area wherein children across that particular territory can benefit with these hubs, and we pull in the resources across these schools. So that's one more, kind of, it's something, it's on cards, it's on paper, it's not yet started, the implementation is not yet started, but that's on cards for us going ahead. So this is how we are at this point in time tackling the current situation and upgrading ourselves simultaneously. Going ahead, AI is going to be the say. Going ahead, cloud computing in combination with AI is going to be the say. Blockchain we have not yet integrated in our schools at this point in time, but yes, definitely once we are able to go to a certain level with the kind of things that we're doing right now, the next on cards is blockchain that we want to come up with in terms of usage. Right. So that's about it, Mr. Dev.
Thank you, Anand. I'll come to you, Dr. Amrita now. One, I would want an update in terms of what sort of different technologies you are using in your school and what sort of use cases. And besides that, one specific area I would like to know is assessment. The assessment and the examination that has become very critical in this scenario when you can't have that normal assessment methodology. So, how far technology has been used for the assessment process?
Okay, thank you, and a good question. So, like Mr. Anant actually said, even for us, when the pandemic hit or the lockdowns happened, thankfully, we were pretty well prepared because in other countries, a lot of all this was already ongoing. So, our remote learning plans and everything was very much in place, and the teachers were already trained. So, as a Microsoft Showcase school, we were able to very smoothly transition at that point in time. But um, training teachers and talking about, we've been talking about and we've been trying to do blended learning for years and years. But still, when it becomes completely remote, it's a different experience. Suddenly, that human element, that sense of everyone together in one place is missed. And as Mr. Krishnan was also trying to, also alluding to the fact that mental well-being, emotional well-being, and stress really took the center stage after a point in time. Initially, there was a lot of happiness around, okay, wow, we've been able to, a lot of wow factors created, lots of new things, everybody learning new things. And of course, parents after the initial orientations found everything, oh, it's possible, it's happening, oh, children are enjoying it. And children are always well versed, have always been well versed with technology, so they enjoy a whole lot is possible, and they explore everything, so what teachers. But over a period of time, we realized how important it is to integrate not just assessments, but also a lot of reflection, uh, because a lot that possible was, naturally happening when we were offline is not happening, and a void is felt after a point in time. So reflective practice, which was otherwise also inbuilt in the system, now we had to find digital ways to build it in. So that was done as one of the first steps through the same means. And we did speak to Microsoft and we raised this concern, and they also helped in multiple ways. Plus, we found many other softwares which helped also. Now, to answer your question on assessment, assessment is really at the heart of anything to do with teaching and learning. There is no learning unless we don't have really assessment as learning and for learning going on. So, uh, a lot of tools which were readily available. I'm conscious of not naming specific tools here, but a lot of tools which were very readily available, and many of these applications were free of cost available to the teachers, made it much easier for teachers to do the data analysis that they were otherwise very often engaged in doing manually. So it made assessment really, really more useful in terms of the data analysis that the teacher could use, the self assessment that the student could do. We already have a very 360-degree kind of an evaluation process. So children engage in a whole lot of self evaluation. So while we still continued with our three colored pens and all those other strategies, because children enjoy a lot of all those aspects, but we managed to create those online, and branching questions that were possible within MCQs, for instance, made it much easier. Teachers started using those options much more. And today, when children are hybrid, or when we discuss our plans for the future of when children will be back in school, the teachers are not willing anymore to go back to the old worksheet pattern. Now we are hybrid, so some children do not have devices and they are sitting in front. Teachers have to plan separately for them, so they find it tough. It's the other way around already. I mean, it's just been 15 months. They question, okay, so I've planned it in the branching way for them. Now for these, okay, I need these 5 sheets added. So there's a lot of paper for, so teachers are already in that zone of, okay, for assessments, we're going to continue it to be with the use of technology, because of course it's easier, it's faster, and the data is utilized much better. It is way more personalized. So all that is extremely beneficial. Now with CBSE announcing all this about MCQs, the November exam, which will be so MCQ based, it's even more drilled in. Okay, we were already doing this, but now, okay, this has become suddenly very important for parents. Now parents are parents who earlier probably, very often asked us, okay, why are you doing so many MCQs? We generally have this, that progress has to be measured in every lesson. It's very critical. So teachers begin a lesson with a very short MCQ, because we found it a quick and easy way. It's a very there are other ways also. I mean, you can't do the same thing every day, it'll be way too boring. But it's a very commonly utilized strategy. So teachers would usually begin a lesson with an MCQ and also end it, and so the baseline and the end line, and they are able to see or measure progress, and they are able to then see, okay, this is where we are going fine, this aspect needs support. So all that analysis and work became way easier. Now parents insist on it much more, because all the other strategies that we anyway use on a regular basis are, parents are because of CBSE. But other than all that, I think technology has now entered the very bloodstream of education. With whatever happened, the pandemic is like a watershed moment that has made our classroom, it's transcended the idea of space and time. Children are no longer sitting in this space, a confined space, interacting only with their classmates or batchmates or schoolmates. They are interacting on, not just during a student exchange program, but almost on an everyday basis with their peers in other parts of the world. There is so much of co-teaching happening, there is so much of co-learning and collaboration, or global collaboration rather, happening. And I think that is a lot of learning that's really helping out. Teachers are also collaborating so much more with their colleagues from other parts of the world, and often, a teacher's using a tool and then discussing it with somebody, another teacher, and they're saying, okay, I used it this way. So a lot of learning community has naturally emerged, and I think that has been one of the biggest things that's happened. Teachers have moved, I see, from being facilitators. Earlier, of course, sage on stage, those days were long gone, but we were always talking about teachers as facilitators of learning. Now I think they're co-learners, they're no longer just facilitators of learning. So we are learning every day, and children teach every day so much to their teachers. And that's the beauty of technology. The classroom has genuinely transformed into a space where a lot of co-teaching is happening amongst teachers, between students and teachers. So everybody is exploring every day. And yes, learning outcomes that we set out to achieve are not just being achieved, they're being achieved way better than earlier. Yes, there needs to be a very conscious effort. We want the children back in school, because that's like so needed. um, and they all need each other. uh, but yes, there is a power of yet. Maybe we haven't yet figured out a way to really deal with all the emotional stress and well-being that is really getting affected for teachers as well as students. Um, but possibly we will. I think change is inevitable, and no matter what, we have to live it. And the species that survives, as Darwin calls, so is the one that really adapts. And I think that's what we have all done. And as educators, I'm really proud of the education community or the whole fraternity, because yes, we were thrown into the deep end, and I think everyone managed. I know so many schools in very, very remote areas, so many budget private schools where teachers have tried to reach out in multiple ways. I mean, somebody did not have my number, I may have trained long back, but through Twitter or through some handle, they still reached out. I'm trying this with my phone. I have only this device. Can I do something else? What more can you help? So that sense of, okay, technology, well, that's not going to help, that has gone. Teachers are very open to it. And the only thing is, it is a demon, it has its disadvantages, it needs to be tamed by us
Obviously.
rather than the other way around.
Sure. Great. Thanks. That's a very optimistic take on the technology, if I may say, and very nice to hear that. I'll come to you, Dr. Manjula, now. One, again, the same question in terms of what are the technologies that you have been using and how successful they have been. And additional, what I would like to ask is, Dr. Amrita also talked about now it's a co-learning. So, like teachers would be imparting maybe the domain knowledge or the subject knowledge to the students, and in some cases, the students are more, if I may say, they are more digital natives. So they are more tech savvy. So some of those technologies learning they can be imparting to the teachers themselves. So my question is, amongst the students, if we break very broadly categorize students, it will be the primary level, then the mid level, those class 6, 7, 8 kind of kids, and then the higher secondary, the class 11, 12 schools. So amongst these categories, have you seen any different ways technology has been adopted? And if so, what has been the impact of that?
Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Day. And good afternoon to all my panelist friends. For our school, what literally we did, like my other co-panelists said, that when we were thrown into this idea of reaching out to the children, whatever may come, technology came in. Yes, we were one of those better schools which had access to it. The teachers were trained. We had Microsoft absolutely working in our school. So was Google Suite. It was a Google Suite school. So it was a bit easy. The only thing that it gave, it was an acceleration to the use of technology, which was not really happening in that speed that that pandemic accelerated. So in our school, since both the things were there, so taking classes, reaching out to the students at all the levels, when you're saying the babies at the primary, pre-primary, the middle school, and the high school, that was an easy task. And since Bangalore is a techie town, most of the parents, very quickly synchronized with whether it was the Teams or Google Suite or whatever platform that we used, and they were quick to adapt to that. But what really helped us was that since our school was one of the schools that was part of the AI program of the CBSE, so we took a lot of help from our parents who worked in IBM and other tech companies, and we tried to bring in AI as much as possible. I wouldn't say 100%, but there was a 30% penetration into the school. With that coming in, we could personalize the learning. What happened is that we had this intelligent tutoring system, which, it was a practical way of reaching out to children who were little differentiated. the ones who didn't get time. There were some children who had moved out of town because most of the tech companies gave them work from home, so they were not in Bangalore. So it was easy for them to have this intelligent tutoring system. The other one was the adaptive grouping. We know because it was the end of the session and the beginning of the new session, so we generally knew the children who were in our school and which group they would fall into, and which was not possible in a normal classroom, where obviously we do not believe in the hierarchical system, that the best or the children who have a higher uptake are in a different section. But here, because it was online, we could do that. We could group children into different levels of interests, I would say. I wouldn't say their levels of uptake, but a lot of interest. There was this maths group, there was this social science group. And as you said, the children would tell us that, let's go on to the Google Museum, or let's have a walk through, through a country, or we can see an actual virtual, the earth spinning. So that really helped. And apart from that, the virtual learning became a reality. We try to add a bit of what I would say, this activity based, because it in the beginning it was all one way, where the teachers were kind of, even if it was a task, it was done with children in their own groups at home. But then we started through AI, we formed their groups, and they could do it together. We also used Kahoot and various other platforms. Of course, the grading became easy because of AI, and assessment became real time. And then data analysis was so much easy. We could actually identify those children, because the gifted students were the ones who were really suffering in our Indian education system. We were always targeting at the average, above average, and we would take care of the ones who were lagging behind with remedial classes. But the gifted children, there was actually no such program as such in every class. So this helped us to devise, because now we had all the time in the world, and there was no school timing like from 8 to 2 or whatever. So we could get these children on board after school or at a time scheduled by the teacher, and that really helped, because we found the interest rate of the children really accelerated. We found there were children who were beautiful in languages. There were children who loved social sciences. That's one more thing which I loved with the pandemic, is that usually in a classroom, when a social studies teacher would come, they would say, oh, it's going to be boring. It's going to be geography, history, and it's not as exciting. But with the technology tools, the virtual reality, it was wonderful, having that line in your room or whatever. It was fantastic. So they started reading history. They could actually be part of that history, and that helped a lot. And similarly for experiments, we had a lot of online experiments conducted, which really interested the children. Maybe when I look back, there wasn't much of lab work as much as learning and a one-way kind of teaching process. So this became very experiential. For example, the smaller children, instead of teaching them a concept, we would ask them, figure out why a stone sinks into the water and a sponge remains on top. Of course, they would come up with different ideas and different answers. And then there was a discussion. And the best part was, the parents were also co-learning. And that is what added a lot of values, because when parents are with you on board, we get a different perspective other than just the teacher and the student. And we had scientists, we had mathematicians who would come and say, ma'am, come on, I will teach this little concept. Or they would just send us a message. They wouldn't disturb a class really. But and that was lovely. So we had co-teachers in class. So the teachers would sync with the parents and say, okay, let's co-teach this together. Similarly for crafts and the co-curricular activities, we had lots of parents who were very good at various arts and things which in a normal time we might have not got to know, just because we were all on board, the parent, the student, the school. So it was fantastic. And so this was one way. And when you say when the how the children co-teached, yes, we were very, very worried in the beginning, because what happened is that with all these new teaching companies coming into the market, uh, you know any concept, anything that a child wanted, it was on a click of a button. I mean, actually he can choose the teacher. He doesn't have to go to Mrs. George for English or Mrs. Lena for biology. So the teachers also upgraded, because they soon learned that the children are coming up with certain questions or trying to explain different content in their own way, and we knew that it is coming from some other source. So every teacher had to upskill, which is a good thing in when we, in hindsight, when I look, because when there is a competition, we have the challenge. So it's a fantastic learning for the teachers. And the children, they opened up, they became more empathetic, they understood. So did the parents, because they understood that it was not an easy task to be a teacher. It's not just carrying a bag and going to school and teaching something, correcting and end of the term examination. So they knew that it is a tough job, and how to reach out to the children for every concept. But I would say, all in all, what happened is the level of teaching learning, I would say it excelled to a certain extent, because everyone had to be absolutely vigilant that they know their subject, they're teaching the right way, they are engaging the students in their voice. When I say the children have to have the voice, the students have to have the voice, and you just can't go blah blah, because you'll be muted. They will mute and they'll just sit, and that's not what we wanted. So it was a very exciting journey. And we had a bit of robotics in our assessments, because we were closely associated with a Japanese company for the robotics in school, since that was all closed. So we thought, how do we use it? So for assessments, we use that. But all in all, I would think at the end of the whole thing, the tools, the technology were just like the chalk and the blackboard for us. They helped us, but it was always through and through the teacher.
Thank you. That's very extensive, and I'll come back to you later. I'll come to Dr. Naidu now. My question is one, obviously, I would like to know what all technologies have we been using and what sort of use cases in your school. And the addition, what I'd like to know is again this democratization of the technology adoption by different strata, social strata, students coming from different social strata. And financial affordability was a question. So, how technology from a school perspective, the technology that you adopted, how did you manage so that you can reach out to all sort of students and effectively, if I may say, a standardized way, use that technology for learning?
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to see some of the questions that you're asking have already been answered by the colleague before me, because there's just that much in schools by way of technology and ideas and things. So most schools have adopted that. I think some of these questions, which were very relevant before the pandemic, have got self-answered by many things happening by default rather than by choice or deliberation. The earlier schools started with the adaptation of a technology, say from the 90s, as such, the more of a head start they had. but actually the gap between the haves and the have-nots has narrowed down considerably because just look at the speed of internet available now. Look at the gadgets available. Look at the price of the gadgets. Yes, they're expensive, but they're not half as expensive as they were when we were initially talking about technology. One of the phrases that you used was that we are completely dependent on technology, or our schools being completely dependent on technology. And I'm just throwing that into a question. Are we? I hope to dear God we are not, because there's so much of an angle. So I'm going to take about 3 to 4 minutes. You just take a slightly broader perspective to what we're talking about, which I hope will open the discussion out rather than answering the same question about technology. You know, in the 60s, we used to have this famous song called Dost, Dost Na Raha, Pyar, Pyar Na Raha. And it is so relevant today. If education is at the center of it, everyone is asking that. The administrators in education are asking that, the teachers are asking that, the parents, the students, everyone is asking that. Is education a friend of ours? It's not. I can extend it to technology. All of us are asking this question. How far is technology a friend, and where has it become an enemy? And if it has become an enemy, why? Or it's not enemy, but why do we look at it as an enemy? So I think there are certain givens. Technology is here to stay. Our dependence on technology is here to stay. And anyone who tries to resist it will only find themselves falling back. But we must ask ourselves, what is the measure of falling back? And that's what I'm going to focus on right now. You know, Howard Gardner, when in the 80s and 90s, he came up with multiple intelligences. Because I'm trying to link this to education. We're talking about IT, technology, artificial intelligence in school education. That's really what we're focusing on. And so he had come up with the multiple intelligences in us as human beings, whether it was linguistics, logical, mathematical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalist, or even reflective. You know, who am I? What am I? What am I doing on this planet? That's been the very ethos of all religions and the ethos of all cultures and spirituality in that. And why do we push it aside, saying that's not relevant to good quality education? And if a person is interested in that. So when he came up with all these things, we must ask ourselves, where does IT or artificial intelligence fit in? Does it become an extra component of multiple intelligences? Or is it something which will complement what Howard Gardner has already listed out, and it will just keep complementing it? And so education has moved on. The pandemic has shown us that children have shown a greater adeptness to their own skills, to their own likes and dislikes. And as one of our panelists was saying, they don't want to go into a history class which is going to be taught from the textbook anymore. They want technology, they want videos, they want sound bites, they want co-participation, they want to contribute towards the discussion and all. All this is common, which a classroom may not have had earlier. What Howard Gardner said in 2008 is very important for all of us. He said education is about values. So every aspect taught or learned must have an adequate set of values attached to it. So wherever we bring in technology, wherever we bring in gadgets, however upbeat they are, however good they are, values come to the forefront. Whether it's environmental science, economics, history, medicine, sports, a competition in sports, whatever it is, taking exams, you know, values, ethics are at the core of human existence. Now, if we assume that technology is going to take care of it, it may not, because the human brain functions slightly differently. In 2008, he had also said that within this lifetime, he envisaged school-going students with chips inside their bodies, with a genetic chips or gene chips. And they're going to map the genomes, and very much like he was talking about multiple intelligences, they're going to tell the teacher, excuse me, teacher, but my core competencies are in these areas. Can you really help focus a little more in your subject on these areas so that I can connect with it more? And if that starts happening, technology will get you the genomes. Will the teacher be ready to do something like that? And yet, when we reflect on our own culture in India, our sages, people like Aryabhat, Sushruta, and so many other people, they were talking about modern science thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. You know, I mean, we had calculated the speed of light way before anyone in Western mathematical calculations came up with it, almost to the exact aspect. The concept of trigonometry, concept of surgery, everything was there. So it's been in us, which means without artificial intelligence, the human brain with basics was able to do extremely well. So whenever we talk about artificial intelligence, we have to look at it very carefully. And so Howard Gardner himself said the core of subject distribution, the core of learning, or the human mind will have to be identified not just by subjects, maths and English and sciences and so on, but these 5 areas: the disciplined mind, the synthesizing mind, the creating mind, the respectful mind, and the ethical mind. And if all education of the future is not taking these 5 components of the mind into consideration, the learners will reject us. They will not find what we are doing relevant. It's not going to have meaning for them. That is what evolution is. So technology also has to adapt like education. When Daniel Goleman came out with emotional intelligences in the 80s and 90s, many people brushed this aside. Oh, emotions or IQ is the thing. That's how you test, that's how you take intelligence, and that's how you find people in careers. Today, emotional intelligence has become the crux of the matter. The survival and the success of a human mind is based on that. And now we're also talking about passion quotient, happiness quotient, and we are also talking about social quotient. Something extremely worrying to people now, that with online work happening, are the next generations going to be totally devoid of social skills? They will have forgotten how to interact with each other. And so these are going to be equally important. Otherwise, we'll have people with knowledge, but unfit for the world that is going to evolve. And Daniel Goleman said, don't forget the heart. No amount of learning can happen just from the mind. The mind is heavily dependent on the heart. And so this brings us to the know thyself concept. The more you get self-absorbed, I have knowledge, I've got to specialize in this, I'm going to do this, this technology will show me with or without the school, home learning, homeschooling, all these aspects which will throw everything at us. You can do a Byju's today and prop yourself up. You don't need a school. But is it going to make you fit for the future world is the important thing. And why is that? Because Stephen Hawking, whom we all know, had a huge physical disability and was dependent on that for most of his lifetime, came up with some very, very important aspects. And he was the one who said, people who boast about their IQ are losers. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And life would be tragic if it weren't funny. Adapt to change is important. Technology is that adaptation to change. And so, yes, it is. But finally, just to give you a very quick comparison between the human brain and artificial intelligence. The human brain has the ability to think and feel, whereas artificial intelligence of any kind, whether it's the computer, whether it's the mobile phone, whatever it is data-based. What goes in, comes out. Human brain can adapt, create, it can change, but artificial intelligence functions on commands. What commands you give to it, it'll do that, and it'll feed you that. The human brain is more analogous, and the artificial intelligence is more digital. The human brain is adaptive, and the artificial intelligence is reactive. And so you see, we are getting 2 streams here, like 2 different human beings, 2 different brains. And the success of the future is in complementing each of these. The spontaneity of the human brain cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence, but the speed of artificial intelligence and accessing data from around the world, no human brain can cope up with. So it's not one or the other, it's complementing the 2 and how we utilize the 2 of them. And that is why I think, yes, artificial intelligence is here to stay, but the point is, how real is it and how effective can we make them? And so that artificial intelligence it takes a different connotation in the future. It's not artificial anymore. It's the new real intelligence, which is a combination of the human brain and technology.
Sure. Great. Thanks. You have given a different spin and different perspective on this. Very useful. I'll come to you, Devika, now. Again, first part is a common one, specifically the technologies that you have deployed and how they have helped. And I would like to touch upon one point which one of the panelists touched upon. If we look at the earlier in the physical classroom, there were 3 types of students. There is certain above average ones, the majority are the average students, and there are some who are below average. So normally in a classroom education, teachers have focused more always on the average and to some extent on the below average for certain remedial actions, and the above average in some sort have uh, taken care of themselves. So now using technology, the current scenario, and where education is being imparted online, leveraging this technology, how have you been addressing these three kind of students?
Thank you very much, Mr. Day, and a very good afternoon to all the fellow panelists. I am glad I heard so many wonderful views today afternoon. I would like to start, Mr. Day, by saying that we were among the fortunate few, and I think I sit with others in this room who were already thinking about using technology, and our teachers were trained. We had the equipment. When we moved to the virtual world, it was almost seamless, and we did not really have to struggle too much because we had the relevant resources, we had the training, and we were already on that path. When the world changed, our teachers who were very much into professional development and a lot of learning and a lot of experimentation, they took charge and they changed themselves into this community of learners who decided, okay, there is something new. And we are the ones who are going to innovate and create and make this world a better place for our children. At the heart of everything that we wanted to do in March 2020 was the fact that whatever happens, if learners cannot come to our building, our education faculty, the teacher leaders, the educators will go to the learners. So it's the same thing. If the mountain needs to be moved, we will move the mountains, and we will ensure that the children get what they need. Keeping that as the center of everything that we did, we were very quick. So technology became a tool, and as far as teachers are concerned, we all know any tool that we get, we are excited about it, and we find ways of wielding it in the best possible manner so that our children are the ones who benefit out of it. So we used technology the best that we could, and we did not really need to spend too much money because a lot of people all over the world came forward with wonderful free new stuff, which I'm sure all of us have explored and we have used throughout these 15 months. Our teachers did the same. Our parent partnership became so strong. The partnership which we used to focus on, talk about, try to nurture, happened in such a manner that it became a source of strength for all of us. To begin with, there was obviously a lot of fear, dread, because we were trying to navigate into uncharted waters, and we were not very sure of ourselves. But within the first couple of months, we started taking this as a new journey which is going to come which would be beneficial for all of us. As far as the assessment is concerned, I think the best thing happened during the pandemic. The one that we were as teachers not very fond of, the summative, was thrown out of the window to begin with, and we started playing with the formative. So assessment for learning, assessment as learning, things that we value, things that we like, we started playing with that, and we found that it was working. In the online mode, it was very easy to have a Kahoot quiz and figure out what your children were doing. It was easy to use a flipped classroom methodology to find out where the child was, and everything became very personalized. So when you talk about a classroom which had different types of children, we got into a celebration of that differentiation, because we want children to know that the world has different types of people. And since they were not able to come to school and meet different types of people, we started using so many different things. So if you go into a Zoom classroom, and you are going to go into smaller groups, you can do that. You can still find out what the children in those small groups are discussing. You can focus on the children who need a little extra help. You have all the time in the world, one of my colleagues mentioned. So in Mumbai, we spent 2 hours going and 2 hours coming from school. So we had an extra 4 hour availability of time on our hands, and we used it beautifully. Our teachers used it beautifully. They could work with large groups when needed. They could work with smaller groups when needed. They could use various tools that they had been trained on for years, for that matter. And the move was actually very exciting. The best part was that our teacher parent meetings became focused. We could talk about exactly what we needed to, because one on one, both parents, which was a little difficult in an urban setting, we could interact with both parents every time we wanted to. The journey was difficult to begin with, but I think we have learned many new things which will help us in the future. And I always say that in the urban context, we are the village that brings up the child. And I think schools, as imparters of education, are a thing of the past. What we focus on now is social and emotional learning, building those bonds even when we are online. We try to figure out, now it is not about the screen anymore. We try to figure out ways in which the teacher is on screen, but the child has to perhaps run and run around the room 5 times. I'm talking about a young child where the teacher is talking about numeracy and the concept of numbers. So instead of sitting on screen and trying to figure out ways in which they can use different apps, our teachers have now started doing this, that we want our children to move away from the screen. They can run around 5 times and come back and tell us that, yes, I counted. And things like that. Those are small things, but they make a difference. We ask parents to help us with the science activities, because the kitchen is a beautiful lab. And if we have our kitchens at home, we can ask parents and children to get together, and our parent-child activities bring a lot of joy and a lot of learning that is deep, learning that is reflective, learning that is engaging, and that brings joy. So I think the pandemic has taught us many, many valuable lessons. Our schools, when we get back to them, whatever form it is, will definitely be richer because of all the learning that we have had during this year and a half. The pandemic has taught us lessons about empathy. We think about the community. We are a school that is very, very focused on community service. We hold the SDGs very close to our heart, and we have tried to figure out ways in which we can be of use to the world, because learning is not the only thing that we do. As the village, like I said, we need to talk about everybody who inhabits this village of ours, which is going through some tough times, and our children have understood that. I would like to talk about one child in our school early on in the pandemic, when we were still trying to struggle with different things. This is a junior KG child, all of 4.5 or 5-year-old. And she figured out that the one way that I can help my world is by making lemonade every day. Every day she would make 10 glasses of lemonade, and an adult from the home, so a parent or an older sibling, would go down and give it to the service providers in the building. And it was, I am talking about something small purposely, because there are people who are doing many, many big things in the world. The fact that a 5-year-old thought about it is a great achievement, I think, of the learning community that we have built in our school.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I purposely did not answer the question about differentiation, because as educators, all of us understand that we celebrate every level of learning in the school. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll come to Mukesh Sharma, and I'd put the question on technology, especially you have done some work around blockchain. So if you can elaborate on what sort of work around the technology that has been done?
First of all, thank you very much, Rajneesh, for inviting me here. And it was such a pleasure to hear all the panelists so far. I was very impressed with what Mr. Ananta talked about, his school, what they've done at Calorex Group. And everyone, very impressive. I think technology is here to stay. Technology is something that is going to drive education as we move forward. Um, I I come from technology background. I'm a first generation entrepreneur from BITS Pilani. I started a tech company which I took an exit just earlier this year. Um, I used to work from the tech company. I used to work with the education technology companies for last 18 years through that company. I had an opportunity of working with Harvard University, with Oxford University Press, with Kaplan University, and you name an ed tech company, we would have worked with them. Pearson Education, Kaplan, Cengage Learning, and such. And then during this journey that I had, I felt that I need to be able to do something in India, and moved away from technology and started a school called Prometheus School, which is basically, the idea was to be able to have an affordable IB school that can create entrepreneurs and Olympians. Because parents, coming to our school, would be able to support their child in whatever the child is passionate about. Um, as far as technology is concerned, AI, like Dr. Naidu talked about, you know, AI is all computer data analytics that is collected. Um, Human brain, it cannot be compared with, right? And that's obviously not the idea. The idea is for a teacher to be able to leverage the data that is collected through whatever platform where you have AI enablement already happened. So the data about the behavior of the student for a particular topic about child's interest, adaptive learning, the learning management systems that exist, wherein you ask, we all understand as educators that every child learns at his or her own pace, different learning abilities, right? So the adaptive LMSs, learning management systems, allow um, student to go at their own pace of learning, right? So there is definitely value that is generated, that is created, that is provided to teachers through artificial intelligence and machine learning in these educational platforms, the tools that we use. All the panelists, co-panelists here, you all represent, excellent schools. We are the blessed ones. We had, like all of you. It just took us, a night to come online, because we I consider my team as well as all everyone from Prometheus as digital natives, right? So we were all prepared. But these schools that are in remote schools, that have children who cannot afford laptops, they had challenges. And there are several schools. I can talk about Pilani. I was there last weekend. Pilani is basically known for schools and Birla Institution. A lot of schools have shut down their doors. They have stopped. Why? Because of online learning, right? And their inability to get teachers and students online. But that aside, how are we leveraging blockchain or AI and ML? So let me quickly share my screen. Share screen. Is my screen visible?
No. Yeah, yes,
So do you see validateme.online?
yes, it's visible.
Okay, all right. So validateme.online is a platform that that we um, onboarded Prometheus School on. Um, if you are following me, if you are able to see what I'm seeing, which is the login page, just tell me. Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to log into this. We said, how do we leverage technology, especially blockchain, in schools? Okay, we started to use this platform validateme.online that allows schools, or for that matter any organization, to issue documents to whether the document is an offer letter or appointment letter or experience letter. But in school scenario, it is students term reports. So if I were to search, let's say, uh, search Kyra. Kyra is one of the students. Kyra's data would be available here. Now, I cannot access anybody's data unless the individual provides me access. What is the benefit of having this platform, blockchain-based platform? Well, child's complete journey is captured on it. If I click on this document, you will be able to see, and I'm hoping that you are seeing the screen which shows Kyra's report. Are you able to see it?
Yes,
Okay, so this is a report that is issued directly on this platform. Um, the advantage is, students, parents, they move from one city to another depending on their job, right, requirements. And when that happens, the data about the school either remains in parents' inbox or in files that get lost as the child grows. So we thought that, we want to be able to capture child's journey, the complete data about child, um, um, in blockchain, in a secure digital wallet, right? That they should be able to access it as they grow up. It would have their complete portfolio, right? So when child completes IBDP or whatever, the A level, they would be able to share the data directly with the university that they are applying it, right? So that is one use of the blockchain platform. It allows it allows us to directly upload documents. We can create our own template. So if I were to just say create our own template, add template, it will show me all the templates that exist. For example, form 5 term 2, form 5 term 2, 4 term 2. And when we go in here, it's basically a template, which is created for that whole grade, and the data comes directly from the student information system platforms that we have, right? And the beauty is that a child gets to have these documents in their safe vault for the rest of their life. So that is one use of what we're calling blockchain and technology. The other one that I want to show you is this OTT. We all are in current scenario. We all are hooked up with Netflix or Amazon Prime and such. We said, we want to have remote learning with Prometheus, wherein all these sessions, I'm sure there are schools here who are using Microsoft Team. There are other, who are using Google G Suite or whatever it is, Zoom, simple Zoom. Those sessions are recorded and those sessions are uploaded on this OTT platform that we've created just for our school teachers and students. So if a student has missed a particular session, they would be able to go in and see the video of the session, because in IB it is not, that you have to they are going to explain a concept. It is more of collaborative learning, inquiry based learning and all. So if I just click on, let's say, grade 5, um, English, I'll be able to see the classes that have taken place, right? I can just go in. I can, as a
Uh,
student, I
Mukeshji, may I request for the paucity of time, this hands-on, if you can wrap it up quickly, because we are, hello? I think Mukeshji got disconnected. In the meantime, I'll come to Dr. Sunita now. One, apart from the technologies, specific technology, I'd like to add one question is we are talking about the NEP implementation. So once the NEP is getting implemented, what role technology will play there? And second is I'd also like you to earlier question which I asked among students in the primary, middle school, and high school, how have you seen the adoption of technology between them?
I think I'm the last one to talk. There's so much which has already been talked about. But your question, wherein NEP is concerned, uh, it's a it's a brilliant move by the government. That's one thing. Much needed, much awaited. There's so much that is going to change in the education system. Now, with this technology, with virtual learning, I personally would say that what I could have done in 5 years from since last year, I achieved in 1.5 years. It has been so quick. And that is all, I think the credit goes to the children. The way, as I always had this vision of having a student-led school, and we our children, right from nursery to grade 12, they work in crews. They don't sit individually, they sit in crews even in the classroom. So that was a big challenge when they were in the school, in the classroom. It was difficult for us, but with Zoom breakout rooms and all of that, that has really happened beautifully. And NEP is all about, I think, talking about the blended learning, and there's so much that they would want integrated learning to happen. And with NEP coming with this virtual learning, I think it's going to be much more beautiful for this child whom we are talking about. I think children are going to really have fun. We might have difficulties with, technology inside the classroom. Right now, the children are there at home, and I have how many? I have around 1,500 teachers sitting at home. I mean, every child has a teacher at home. Every parent is there, so they're well monitored in terms of we do have a BYOD policy and all of that, but somehow it's difficult in the classroom. That is what we had always been thinking, and that's the reason education system never ever brought in computers. I'm talking about CBSE. IB definitely has computer inside the classroom, but in CBSE we couldn't think, and I don't know if we can even think of it in our government schools still. In our private schools, we might think about it, and we might just try to bring out a lot of scope of it. But government schools, I'm still doubtful about. And NEP is definitely going to take the country to a next level if implemented well. We've there is so much that CCE came in. There's so much that comes into us in the education system, but it is all about implementation. Are we really picking it up well? Are we really bringing it up to the children in the same way as it was always planned? This is one thing. And I think everybody else has already spoken about a lot about AI and all. I would just want to focus and just share a little about the discomfort that we had with our 25% economically weaker section children. That was a big challenge in Delhi. And in our school, 25% economically weaker section children, they went back to their hometowns and they had nothing there. Literally the teachers picked up a phone and they took extra classes and did so much around it so that those children are on board. Now, the biggest challenge that we might have once we come back to school and we decide to have technology inside the classroom and everything, the biggest challenge that we will have will be these children. These children only have a phone back home that they are working with somehow. But then if we ask about the laptops inside the classroom, it's challenging. I mean, with no fee hike, the private schools in Delhi are already struggling. That might be a big challenge for us. Otherwise, I think right now virtual learning has been, it has been a blessing to me. We could actually have 95% attendance in our school despite 25% economically weaker section children. So I think we all, it's kudos to all the teachers, all the leaders, I would say. I mean, it has not been easy to really manage the parents because, you're always judged. You have a judge sitting there with the child. ये teacher को ये नहीं आता है, इस teacher को वो नहीं आता है. There's always a comparison and talking about क्या नहीं आता है. But let's understand, in our country, we need 750,000 teachers, and we just have 250,000. So how do we fill up that gap of 500,000 teachers? So in our school, in our country, teacher training was never a priority, and B.Ed was always a thappa. It's a stamp for becoming a teacher. So we all need to really understand these difficulties that our country has, and despite that, the teachers have done a fantabulous job during the pandemic. So I hope I've answered the question. Did I miss out on something?
Sure. Thank you. And now, very quickly, I would come to all the panelists, and 1 minute each to each of you. See, we are here, we like it or not, but the way the pandemic is shaping up to be, we are here for at least a blended kind of learning, a hybrid model of education for the near foreseeable future, at least for next couple of academic years. Definitely it looks like, hopefully not longer. Whatever be the situation, in a blended learning situation, what would be the biggest action point that each of you plan? And 1 minute to each of the panelists. We don't have much time. So I'll start with you, Ananta.
As I said, our current focus is the mental and physical fitness of our teachers and our students, right? Because technology-wise, we are quite well off. Luckily, we have been among the best of schools to kind of get into that forte. Life skills is the second thing we would like to focus on. So these two things, at a blended learning, gets difficult to be working upon, and the child being in front of you or the teacher being in front of the child. It would have been much easier. But then there are other challenges that come up and that pose up, right? As ma'am rightly said, Dr. Swaraj, that you have two people judging you while the child is in a blended environment. One, of course, being the student, the second is somebody along with the student. So you have to not only live up to the expectations of the second person sitting there in the room, but also work upon that person for the child to learn in a better and in an enhanced way, right? So there are multiple challenges that we face. So of course, our main focus would be the mental and the physical health. That goes without saying. Upskilling of teachers is a continuous process, and that's again one activity that we continuously engage in. So.
Thank you. Dr. Amrita, your plan of action.
I think The most important thing in a school is happy people, happy teachers, happy parents, and happy children. It's the happiness quotient that matters really the most. And the pandemic has really been more of a also a social pandemic, where we've all had so much of social isolation, and that is really showing itself. Classroom has genuinely become a space where it is student led, and students agency, voice and choice has been around like never before. So of course we need to foster it. And yes, I so agree with Dr. Swaraj. It's going to be such a huge challenge. Today we have those 1,500 teachers. They may have questioned us, judged us, and everything, but they've also been there. They've been there and they've supported us too, and they've genuinely developed this partnership with us. So yes, we are the village that raises the school, as Ms. Chatterjee mentioned. So beautiful. I love those lines, by the way. And I think happiness, emotional and mental well-being of everybody involved, all stakeholders in the process, that's critical. That's going to be at the top.
Thank you. And yes, those were lovely lines. Dr. Naidu, your plan of action.
Yes. You had asked two questions which may or may not have got answered directly. One is about primary school, middle school, the younger children. How are they coping with technology? And I don't think that's really so much of a concern. This generation, like future generations, are going to be blessed with adapting to technology faster. Where our generation reads instructions to operate a gadget, they just do it where it comes from magically and with far less damage than we've caused by defaulting on it. So I think learning happens because the innate ability is there. It's the opportunity and the belief in that. I had a student who was a worker's child in Munnar in Kerala in the 90s when computer science had just come and computer labs were just starting. And he took it up in grade 11 for the first time. He had never seen a computer. He topped all the CBSE schools in Kerala and was picked up by Cisco very early in his career. And he was a worker's child. He didn't even have electricity in his house, and he excelled. So, there's no correlation absolutely that school education is going to make you something. And that is where I want to end. Schools are not the finishing ground. They're actually where you sow the seeds. And this is where children need to discover themselves. Schools need to believe in that fact. If we start becoming presumptuous that we are going to make whiz kids out of these kids, we are sadly mistaken. In the future, 75% of the jobs are not going to be what they are now. So we cannot even guarantee careers for them. We can only make them discover themselves, and they will become wonderful human beings and wonderful, successful entrepreneurs and whatever leaders based on how we nurture them. Everyone else has said, they've said what I said earlier: happiness quotient, well-being quotient, emotional quotient, everything is going to social, how good you are with social integration. Let's not forget the basics. We're not throwing artificial intelligence or technology out of the window, not at all. I'm saying the other way around. Any school which tries to do it is going to be outdated very soon. But do not become slaves of technology. Keep the human element intact.
Exactly. Anyway, schools might not be the finishing ground, but they are the one that sow the seeds, as you rightly said. I'll come to Devika.
Good to hear about well-being and happiness, and I think that is what all of us value. I just wanted to remind everybody, and I think that's what all of us have been doing. This is not the first change that we have seen, and this will not be the last. We've moved a long way from the caves where we were hunting and gathering, and I think we'll move a long way ahead before we are done. In our school, we have started a journey last year, and we call it a mindful journey to well-being. And it is for all our stakeholders, whether it's the security guard at the gate or the parent at home or the child and the teachers and everybody in between. This is what we are planning to do, and this is what I think is important, because if we take care of our insides, the outsides will continue to change, and we'll move forward along with that. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. I'll come to Mukesh. Before you got disconnected last time, you had talked about, showed the solutions, especially leveraging blockchain. So very briefly, within a minute, if you can talk about the immediate plan of action once this blended learning thing continues.
So, what Dr. Naidu said, I completely echo what he said. And Dr. Amrita, again, happiness quotient, emotional quotient. I think once the children are back to school in the hybrid learning environment, what I would like to see happening is let the child be, let the child be, let them explore, follow them, don't make them do things, let them do things. And I think, um, like Dr. Naidu said, we are not trying to make a child become something. What we have to focus on and what we are going to focus on is the happy environment. How do we create an environment wherein child can give his or her best. Teachers feel happy and want to do more than what they've done. On a daily basis, we are trying to encourage, and we are trying to build an environment wherein everyone is asked to share an act of kindness. um, if you create that culture, one who's not thinking about others or only about self would also start to do things that would basically help the planet, right? And one of our co-panelists talked about this little girl, 4.5 to 5 year old, who used to make lemonade every day. That is an act of kindness. So that's what we are going to do. Learning will happen no matter what.
Sure. Thank you. And Dr. Sunita, you have literally the last word. What
Yes.
are your plan of actions?
We had already started, in fact, with Dr. Ravindran, we've already started the wellness program with the children, parents. So today morning, I had a session with the children, and everybody wrote down that when other schools reopening, they're waiting to come back to school. So my plan at the moment is building that trust between all of us, all the stakeholders, that the children are going to go back, and we are going to go back, and we will trust each other, and anything that we share with each other will be absolutely acceptable and will not be judged about. So that's something that I'm planning to work on, and I've started working on with my teachers. Collaborative model is something that I'm looking forward to, wherein we all come together, all stakeholders join hands and understand how we can really make it beautiful for this child. So these are two things that I have, and I did not answer the question that you had asked about the primary school and the middle school. I think they were just genius. As I always said, that अगर हम A generation हैं तो ये लोग तो Z generation already है. With every 10 months, every 5 months, there's a new generation that just wakes up, that takes birth. So they've been actually they've been teaching the children, so teachers. So it has been just wonderful, to deal with the technology with these children.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. We could have continued this discussion, but paucity of time. So again, I would like to thank all the panelists for a great show. We had a very interactive and insightful discussion here at the APAC Second Global Education and Skills Conclave. And I'm sure we had about 400 live audience watching this. And many of them are representing different schools and academic institutions. And I'm sure some of the things that were discussed here, they can replicate successfully in their schools. Thanks a lot, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to the
Thank you.
panelists.